Welcome back to Stuff About Money They Didn't Teach You in School. I'm Xavier Angel, and I'm joined with my co-host, Erik Garcia, Certified Financial Planners. How you doing today, Erik?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right.
So, look, before we get started,
Okay.
we've already dropped one podcast on the year, 2023.
Two.
Two? Yeah, you know why I don't know we dropped two?
Wait a minute. Two. No, we're about to drop another one in a couple days. So by the time you listen to this will be the third podcast on the year.
So the reason why I got those numbers
Why don't
wrong,
you know? Why don't you know, Xavier? why don't you tell everyone? I already confessed to it on the podcast that's dropping here in
our
a couple
first
days.
podcast of the year, Erik decided not to involve me in it and went and scheduled it and didn't send me the invite. I found out about it probably 45 minutes before we were supposed to go on air.
It's not my problem.
Yep, so I'm gonna forgive you for that one, Erik.
If you just scheduled it, if you were here when I scheduled it, but whatever.
So, which is a great lead into what we were going to talk about today.
Can I ask a question before we jump into it?
Yes.
Do you know who Blackpink is?
Oh, I know who Blackpink. So I taught Erik something new this week.
I learned something they didn't teach me in school.
Who Blackpink is. So
y'all know who Blackpink is, listeners? Y'all know who Blackpink is? I don't know what kind of people listen to our show.
Well, for those who don't know who Blackpink is
go ask your teenage daughter who Blackpink is.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. That's what I had to do.
Or your non-teenage daughter.
Well,
my
actually,
wife.
I was going to say your wife, your wife and your daughter knew who Blackpink.
I got the. You don't know who Blackpink is? I'm like, no. Why would I know who Blackpink is? Anyway, what are we talking about today?
You're supposed to be up to all of that, Erik. Come on now.
I can't keep up with it all. I can't even remember to invite you to the podcast.
Yeah, but you still have two girls in the house. You got to get with it. So,
all right.
So we're gonna reflect on 2022. Okay. So, it's been a year since I did my first podcast.
But hold on.
Go ahead.
You see, I cut my finger. For those of you who are not watching on YouTube, go check it out. I cut my finger, and I have got a Toy Story. I don't know why I have a Toy Story Woody Band-Aid in my house right there.
I didn't even realize you did it. How'd you do that?
Washing a knife.
Today?
No, this was like 2 days ago.
That's when you were thinking about Blackpink, correct?
That's right.
Trying to figure out who Blackpink was.
I don't know what I was washing my knife, and it was just I got careless. So we're not only going to reflect on this podcast, but we're also going to talk about what you and I do as we look forward to the year, particularly for our household finances. So we're going to reflect a little bit, and then we're going to look forward. So make sure you listen to both parts of this show. All right, go ahead, Xavier. I cut you off.
No worries. Look, it was a great year. And as I go back and reflect, I've learned a lot about podcasting over the last 12 months.
And they didn't teach it to you in school.
They did not teach it to me in school. I sat in this chair the second week of January in 2022, and I think that first recording, we probably had it took us about 2.5, 3 hours to get through it. All the stopping and going.
I was worried, y'all. I was ready to go find another co-host.
So,
our editor Riza. So y'all don't get to hear this when one of us mess up. There's always hey Riza, cut that out. Riza, I'm really not telling you to cut this out. So Riza, do not cut this out. I think you called on Riza like 150 times in the first 3 podcasts.
Oh man, it was, but it was a learning experience, and I'm getting more comfortable with it. So it's taken some time, but I'm more comfortable with it.
You look good too.
Well, thank you.
You sound good. You look good.
It's getting better.
All right.
So, going back and reflecting, there are many great shows that we did over the past 12 months. But I think two of the 3 that I wanted to share
Your
today
favorite?
is my favorites. The first was the one that we did with student loans.
Student loans.
Right, student loans. That was with Jessica Burke.
That's right. With Jessica.
New Orleans Wedding Magazine.
That's right.
And Jessica's quote was, "Don't take loans that you do not need and have the interest accrue over time."
So we talked with Jessica about marriage, but that was her one thing about money that she wished she would have learned in school. was don't take, and she was don't take debt that you don't need or borrow money that you don't need, and she was talking specifically about student loan debt.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And on top of that, so it was two parts with her. So the second part of something that she wasn't taught in school was don't live a higher lifestyle than you can afford.
Mm.
And I think both of those were powerful, especially in where we've been over the past year and a half, 2 years.
What do you mean by that? Where we've been? Like we as in like a country, or we as in like you and I, or we as in
you as individuals, right? Many individuals were not working, during the pandemic. You had one income per household, but we were still trying, or individuals were still trying to live like they were prior to 2020, 2021.
Well, shoot, forget it. I mean, the fact that everything's more expensive.
Apparently,
Apparently, there's like, because I'm seeing this all over social media, like eggs are really, really expensive right now. I was out of the egg game for a long time because we raised our own eggs, so I don't even know what a normal dollar amount for a dozen eggs are. But like, man, everyone's talking about eggs. It's like the new gold.
So for those of you that don't know, Eric lives in the city and would walk out his back door every morning and go grab eggs out his hen house or chicken house.
Hens
and come in and cook
eggs.
Yeah, so
it's delicious. It's the most. Those are. I mean, I'm used to paying $16 for a dozen eggs.
Yeah, no, right. It's the price of eggs.
So don't spend. So. Yeah, things are expensive. So to live below your means, and as things got more expensive, if you weren't adjusting, you're in trouble.
So one of the other Daniel Sung was one of our guests as well.
If you I'm gonna tell you right now, if y'all did not listen to that podcast with Daniel Sung, go back and listen to it. You talk about inspiring.
If it's to be, then it's up to me, and that stood out. I actually have that. It's on my desk. That saying that Daniel put out there. If it's to be, then it's up to me.
The thing I love about Daniel is I've got a soft spot in my heart for the immigrant story, and talking to Daniel reminds me so much of talking to my dad. It's very similar stories, coming to a country where they didn't know the culture and really had to, everything that they've earned, they've had to work harder than the average person. And it's just such an inspiring language, just from it's such an inspiring story, just from the culture difference, the language difference. And they both of them built an insurance agency. So like I talked to Daniel, and I feel like I'm just sitting down with my dad, and I love it. But we don't talk that much about insurance. We just talk about family values and how that looks in his family. Just what an incredible leader.
And one of the other things that Daniel talked about, now that you're saying that, was the importance of shared values. Both in business and in marriage. That was another powerful thing that we discussed when we were with Daniel. So,
yeah, let's talk about that shared values. What is? I mean, it might sound obvious, but in a marriage, what's the importance of shared values? How do you see that?
I'm just messing with you. For those of you that can't see us, I was quiet. I was messing with it for a second. So
well, they don't have to see you be quiet. They can hear you be quiet, Xavier. This is an audio show, and
So shared values.
Do you and your wife share values?
We do. We absolutely do. And you mentioned earlier that we were going to talk about or discuss the planning, what we do as a family unit in planning. And so I think one of those.
Don't jump ahead.
What I mean, you asked me about shared values, and I'm about to jump in that. So, one of the things that we discussed was, what are we looking to do in 2023?
You can't go, man. You see, you start this podcast off about how it was real hard for you, and you were uncomfortable, and you kind of come into your own. Now you're just taking over.
I'm following your lead. I mean, you did it for an entire year, so now I'm taking that lead. So
I haven't even had a chance to share my favorite moments from last year.
Go ahead. What are your favorite moments, and then we'll jump into. We're gonna.
All right.
Okay. So what are your moments from last year?
I think so. I got a handful of them. Okay. Earlier in the year, we had Phil Blancato on, and Phil is a chief market strategist, portfolio manager for a firm that we work with, and he said, "Get your emotions out of the way. Your money doesn't know you." And I love that. In the beginning of the year, really before it all kind of went crazy in the market, he's talking about how important it is to keep your emotions out of your investment decisions. And man, let me tell you, last year, I think it was easier to manage money last year than it was to manage emotions.
Yes, I
Clients'
agree.
emotions, our emotions. I mean, the market last year really tested our convictions about what we believe about the stock market. So get your emotions out of the way is something that kind of continued to resonate with me. And that leads me to my next favorite moment was we had Dr. Billy Williams on. And that's another episode that, man,
Definitely go back and take a listen to that one as well.
That's just one tidbit of wisdom after another. But he said lack of discipline is the most expensive item you'll own. Mm-hmm. And when I look back at the market last year and those who became undisciplined in their investment decisions, they become undisciplined and they allowed their emotions to get the best of them to make short-term changes in a portfolio and short-term changes in a long-term portfolio. Now, clearly the market has not recovered yet, but I think most people feel a little bit better about the direction of the market, particularly this year. And if you look at the fourth quarter of last year, significantly better than the second quarter of last year. But for those who forgot or became undisciplined in their investments, they missed out, or they will potentially miss out on this recovery. So keep your emotions in their right place, and if you lack discipline, that's the most expensive item you'll own. Those two, to me, are really important, particularly when we think about the investment management portion of what we do.
And both of those are great, especially going into 2023. So I'm glad you brought those up.
And hold on, in the same vein, I got an investment theme here. Apparently, I didn't realize this as I captured some of these moments. We had one of our guests was Dr. John Grable, and he's a professor at the University of Georgia. He runs their financial planning lab, and a lot of what they deal with is understanding the emotions of investing, the emotions of finances. And I think we met with him maybe like in March, April, May, June, kind of when all the volatility really, really started taking off. So this idea of risk is really important, understanding our risk tolerance. And he said that sometimes if the questions are too complex or require a lot of probability work, the client will overestimate or tell you they're willing to take more risk than they are. So he was talking about this idea of, we try to gauge people's risk tolerance, like how much risk are you willing to take? And sometimes we try to gauge it asking questions that are too complicated for the average person to answer. They don't have the knowledge, and nothing negative, but they don't have the knowledge to be able to properly gauge or answer the question that will give us the information on how to gauge risk. So as we went into the year trying to understand people's tolerance for risk, it becomes very difficult when emotions are high because the market's going crazy, and then all of a sudden your risk tolerance drops, because risk tolerance is kind of like an emotion. It's going to go up and down based off of what's happening. So kind of, again, in that vein of investments, understanding, keep your emotions at bay, be disciplined in your decisions, and understand not just your tolerance for risk, but your capacity. Like, we have a long time till we retire, so we can afford a little bit more risk. We have the capacity to take risk in our portfolio. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like losing money. In fact, I don't think I have any client that enjoys losing money. But understand, this is where the discipline comes in, understanding that time in the market is what makes you money, not timing the market. Understanding those three things, risk tolerance and capacity, emotions and discipline, is a good little recipe for long-term investment success.
You took that from our conversation yesterday.
What?
We were talking about risk yesterday. And
were we?
Part of that conversation was I can give you a risk tolerance questionnaire today or evaluate what your risk is today, but it may be different from what it was last week or next week because of emotions.
It does. Yeah. Risk tolerance is not a very, it's maybe a little bit more sturdy than just our feelings in general. But eventually, when things are more volatile, we're less tolerant for risk. And when things are, rainbows and sunshine, we're more tolerant of risk because it doesn't exist, right? When the market's going up and up and up, there's less risk. So we're more tolerant of risk that doesn't really exist to the same extent that it exists when the markets are volatile.
Right. So, Erik, now I'm going back on track. I'm going to push you forward here. So one of the things we had talked about, what is it that we're doing going into 2023? You also asked me a little bit earlier about shared values and what does that mean? And as business partners, and I'm going to start there, you and I sat down and looked at what are we trying to accomplish? What are the values that we're sharing in 2023? And I think this is an important time that we actually had that opportunity. And we scheduled out, we blocked out, 2-3 days? And sat down and started
2 or 3 days
for the year?
extended to like 7 days because I think there was like perpetual disruption. But
yeah,
cumulatively.
we had talked about trying to get out the office next year and doing this. But the shared values from both a business standpoint and then also in a relationship with your partner, being able to sit down and look at what are you trying to accomplish. And so Maureen and I, one of the things that we want to do this year as a couple is we want to spend money. When we do spend it, we're going to spend it on experiences and not things, not stuff. So that's in our plan, in our financial plan for the year. Let's not just go out and buy stuff. Let's look at what do we want to do together as a family, and that's where we're going to focus our resources on in 2023.
Can you give us some like ideas? What does it look like for your family? An experience, spend money on an experience.
So we've got ideally we'd like 2 vacations this summer or this year in 2023. We've already got one in the books. We booked a 8-day trip. We'll be headed out to California. Our first stop is going to be in LA. We'll probably wind up heading down south to San Diego. Nice. And then we'll see where the wind takes us.
Blows, right?
Yeah, where the wind blows.
Hold on. Are you your trip is more scheduled than that. The wind's not just going to blow you in directions. Like you were sharing. I mean, you have a pretty tight itinerary.
Yeah, we do. We will. And that's so when I go on vacation with Maureen and love my vacations with Maureen, we probably see more stuff than the average person will see on vacation. I mean, Maureen has it down to the hour. We're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and having breakfast, and she wants to be out of the door by this time, and this is where we're going. The kids will tell you when we come back from vacation, they need a couple days to rest. We're just constantly going.
My idea of vacation is wake up when I wake up, drink some coffee, and walk out to the beach and just hang out on the beach for a little while or for however long I want, wherever the wind blows, right?
Wherever it blows.
Some food, go back out to the beach. So that's cool. I like that idea. I like that. It seems like there's an intentionality of you planning on spending money on experience. Because I know you've done that in the past. So it's not necessarily, because I know you had some experiences last year that you spent money on.
Right. And it's nothing new. But when we sit down and we start talking about what does the year look like, those are things that we're putting down on paper is this is what our year is going to look like. These are the things that we want to do. That way we have an idea going into the year. Are we saving? What we're saving for? What is our goal? And that way we have it planned out. We're not coming in May and saying, oh, look, you know what? We need to do this in June. And then where can we get the money from?
Yeah. In June. Like, oh man, we're leaving tomorrow.
Right.
We're doing
it. Yeah. Oh, and I did forget to say this. So Mark, my 22-year-old now, is graduating from Notre Dame in May So
That's where all your money's going.
yeah. So we'll be headed to Notre Dame for graduation as well in May.
Okay.
So it's going to be a fun-filled year for us.
Yeah, one of the things I do when I'm planning my year, and I'm not a big like, oh, it's a new year, it's a new opportunity to make good decisions. Like to me, it's just another day. It's just we turn the calendar. There is a little bit of memorializing last year. It's an opportunity to reflect, obviously, because a lot of things end end at the end of the year, and new things start. So there is that opportunity, but I don't make a huge deal of it. One of the things I do, and this is kind of perpetual, and certainly the end of the year is a good time to do it, is just kind of inventory, kind of where we are financially. So where are our investments at? What do we have in short-term savings? What's our, what debt do we have? And then also, what do we want to do in the year that's off normal budget, right? It's not like eating. It's we need to renovate a room. We want to take a trip. We need to spend, buy a car for a teenage driver. Like, what are those big things? And
you're now buying eggs for the first time.
Apparently,
and the price of eggs have doubled.
Yeah. We I don't know. I don't buy. We order our eggs through Instacart from Costco, so I don't know what they are. All I know is that meat's expensive. I buy meat, and meat's expensive, so I can imagine what eggs are. But maybe I should have planned for eggs. Maybe I should have planned for eggs.
Put that in your budget.
I got to put that in my budget. No, but what are those off-budget items that are bigger that are not part of my normal cash flow? And then I start mentally accounting on how I'm going to pay for them. So we have, like you, we have a trip planned. So I'm mentally accounting, where's that money going to come from? How am I going to pay for it? And I like to have as much as possible. If I'm doing like a trip, I want to have it paid for before I go on the trip. I don't want to come home from the trip, have had this amazing experience, and then be strapped with the stress or the burden of debt. So I want to go to the trip. I want to suffer now, pay it now, go on the trip, have a great time, not worry about money while I'm there, and then come home and just have experiences and no debt from the trip. So I like to be proactive, and that's something that I kind of mentally account for in the beginning of the year.
And you have to. It helps with, and we do this in our planning with our clients. We're looking at cash flow. And this helps with knowing where your cash is, what's coming in, what's going out, what the future holds for you as far as spending it goes. So we've done this both with our wives and from a family standpoint, but we got together as business partners and had to sit down and do this as well. And look at what are the expenses that are out of the ordinary. And one of them is, renovating the office. So that's we're building out or the goal is to build out a podcast.
We're gonna have a little podcast studio, y'all. Should be fantastic. So Xavier and I will be in the same room, as opposed to, there won't be a wall between us.
Yeah. So
it's be fantastic.
That's so. One of my recommendations is sit down with your business partner, sit down with your lifelong partner, and look at what are some of the things that we can be doing now. January, February is a great time to begin planning, and looking at budgeting, looking at cash flow.
So on budgeting, let me say this. This is actually pretty exciting. One of the things that we finally were able to wrap up is our budgeting video course. So we're about to start promoting that, and basically what it is, it actually came out of my annual kind of reflection of finances. Like I've got the money, but for some reason it's never in the right account at the right time. Budgeting the traditional way was always, I just don't have the personality. I don't have the mindset to be so technical and so meticulous about little bitty expenses. And so I kind of developed the way of managing cash flow years and years and years ago. And I started talking about it with clients, and I shared it with one client. It actually wasn't a client, it was a friend. 6 months later, he comes to me. He's like, dude, like, so my wife and I, we've been doing what you told us to do. I'm like, what did I tell you to do? And he verbalized back, and I'm like, okay. And he goes, it's been fantastic. We've been able to pay off one of our credit cards. And I'm like, oh, that's great. So last year, or it's actually been longer than a year, worked on putting it in a video series, and we're about to put it up on our website. So we got that kicked off. So you're talking about budgeting and cash flow management. This is it's a process to manage cash flow. Okay, but we're calling it budgeting made easy.
Definitely check it out once and we'll let everyone know when it's live. Erik did a great job with putting this together, and putting the video together. We've had a test run with several clients, and they've all had positive things to come back and say about it. So, hats off to Erik for putting that together.
Hats off.
There you go.
Hats off. And dang, there was something else. There's something else I was going to say, but it eludes me at this.
There's just so much to happen in 2022, and so much potential for 2023. I'm excited about the new year for everything.
So leave us with a good word, Xavier.
With a good word.
Before you leave us with a good word on the budgeting course, I'll tell you what we're going to do. By the time this episode drops, we will probably have it published. So there will be a link to the budgeting course in the show notes. So if you are a client listening and you want access to it, email me, because clients will have access to it. If you're not a client, there will be a cost for it, but it'll be more than worth it. But anyway, what were you saying? Leave us with a good word, Xavier.
So I'm going to go back to Daniel's quote. Mm-hmm. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's strong.
No one making financial decisions for you, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. So awesome. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening on our reflection and looking forward episode. We got some good stuff for y'all this year.